Cleopatra was not just a queen, she was Egypt's final pharaoh, fluent in multiple languages and deeply intelligent. Her reign was one of strategy and survival in a world dominated by Rome. Though still young, she had already shared power with her father and siblings, outmaneuvering all to rule alone. Her past with Julius Caesar had not only secured her throne but also produced a son, Caesar Ion. When Caesar was assassinated, her security faded. Egypt's future again stood on unstable ground. Mark Antony, meanwhile, was a skilled Roman general. Loyal to Caesar and a key figure in avenging his death, he held immense power but was prone to indulgence. He was married, politically tied to Rome, yet emotionally unanchored. After Caesar's death, the Roman Republic was split between Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. Antony controlled the eastern provinces and summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus not just for political negotiation but to assess her loyalty. Cleopatra didn't arrive quietly. She sailed in on a golden barge, dressed as the goddess Isis, surrounded by incense and musicians. Antony, known for his confidence, was left speechless. It wasn't just her appearance, but the control she radiated. He expected a ruler begging for Roman favor. Instead, he found a woman who commanded respect. Their meeting was meant to secure Egypt's alliance, but what followed was far more intimate. The attraction between them was instant, yet not impulsive. Antony admired her intellect and strength, far different from the reserved Roman women he knew. Cleopatra saw in him not just a Roman commander, but a potential protector of Egypt's independence. They stayed together for days, indulging in luxury, conversation, and strategy. What began as political seduction quickly became genuine affection. But theirs was a union with consequences. Antony was married to Fulvia, then later Octavia, Octavian's sister. Yet he remained in Egypt with Cleopatra for months, publicly favoring her over his Roman duties. Cleopatra, though used to alliances with powerful men, found something different in Antony. He wasn't Caesar, he was emotional, impulsive, passionate. Unlike Caesar, Antony returned her affections openly, unafraid of scandal. She gave birth to twins, Alexander Aelios and Cleopatra Selene, binding their destinies even further. Despite their closeness, both knew this relationship was dangerous. Rome whispered about the Eastern Queen manipulating one of its greatest generals. But Cleopatra and Antony didn't seem to care. Whether it was love or calculated partnership, they leaned into each other fully. Power, politics, and passion merged into something rare. This was not a tale of innocent love. It was a collision of empires, of two rulers defying expectations. Yet in those early months, their hearts seemed to beat in unison. Each needed the other not just to survive, but to rule. In that moment, the world around them faded. For Cleopatra and Antony, the love story had begun, but the shadow of betrayal already loomed. Their affair quickly became more than whispers in Rome, it turned into a scandal. Mark Antony, now married to Octavia as a gesture of peace with her brother Octavian, was still drawn back to Cleopatra. Despite Octavia's loyalty and patience, Antony ignored her, returning again to Egypt where Cleopatra waited. What started as diplomacy had become devotion, and eventually, obsession. In Alexandria, they lived like rulers of a joint empire. Antony gave her land once belonging to Rome, naming her Queen of Kings. Their children were declared royalty, a direct insult to Roman authority. He abandoned Roman customs, wearing Eastern robes and participating in Egyptian rituals. Rome saw a general lost in desire, betraying his culture and vows for a foreign queen. Cleopatra, though once cautious, embraced the new dynamic. She believed their union could restore Egyptian dominance. Antony offered more than protection, he gave her children legitimacy and power. Still, underneath the romance, she watched closely. She had trusted Caesar and ended up alone with a child and enemies. With Antony, she held affection, but she also calculated. The more time he spent in Egypt, the more isolated Antony became from his Roman allies. Senators murmured of treason. Octavian, careful and ambitious, positioned himself as the defender of Roman tradition. He used Antony's actions to sway public opinion, painting Cleopatra as a manipulative temptress. Antony's letters to the Senate were ignored. He was now seen as a man who had chosen lust over loyalty. Even Antony's generals began to question his priorities. He granted eastern territories to Cleopatra and their children, weakening Rome's hold over those lands. These actions weren't just betrayals of Octavia, they were betrayals of the Republic. Rome was built on discipline and order. Antony had chosen emotion over empire. Yet behind closed doors, Antony believed he was creating a new world. A Roman-Egyptian alliance ruled by passion and shared power. He saw Octavian as a rival, not a leader. Cleopatra saw herself as more than a consort, she was his equal. Together, they planned, ruled, and loved. But the world outside Alexandria didn't understand, nor care about, their dreams. Their bond deepened through the years. Cleopatra bore him another son, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Their children played together under golden ceilings while the Roman world waited for Antony to return. But he wouldn't. Not to Octavia, not to the Senate. His heart and ambition belonged elsewhere. The betrayal wasn't just of a wife or a nation, it was of a legacy. Antony had once been considered Rome's future. Now, he was its cautionary tale. In loving Cleopatra, he had crossed a line from which there would be no return. And while their love burned bright, so too did the fury of those who felt left behind. Their enemies were no longer in the shadows. They were gathering strength, waiting for the moment to strike. The alliance between Cleopatra and Mark Antony had reached its peak, but so had the tension across the empire. Octavian moved swiftly, turning public opinion further against Antony. His speeches framed the affair not just as immoral but treasonous. Antony was accused of giving away Roman land, accepting foreign gods, and worse, placing Cleopatra above Roman law. The Senate, under Octavian's influence, revoked Antony's authority. War was no longer political, it was personal. But Antony didn't yield. Instead of returning to Rome to defend himself, he declared Caesar Ion, Cleopatra's son with Julius Caesar, the true heir of Caesar, challenging Octavian's claim. This wasn't just political posturing, it was a direct threat. Cleopatra supported the decision, knowing full well it would escalate tensions. Together, they amassed armies and navies, believing their combined strength could crush any opposition. Octavian didn't wait. He declared war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra, a strategic move that framed the conflict as a defense of Rome against an eastern invader. The symbolism mattered. Rome would never tolerate being ruled from Alexandria. By making Cleopatra the enemy, Octavian cast Antony as a victim of seduction rather than a traitor by choice. The pivotal confrontation came at the Battle of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra's forces met Octavian's navy in a clash that would decide their fate. But the coordination faltered. As the battle intensified, Cleopatra's fleet unexpectedly retreated. Whether it was fear or strategy, her sudden withdrawal left Antony exposed. Instead of rallying his men, he followed her, abandoning the battle and sealing their defeat. The news reached Rome before they did. Antony was now a broken figure. Former allies abandoned him, cities surrendered without resistance, and his once powerful army dissolved. The man who had once stood beside Caesar was now seen as a puppet of a foreign queen. Back in Alexandria, their relationship began to show strain. The defeat weighed heavily. Antony questioned Cleopatra's actions during the battle, and whispers of doubt crept into their once unshakable bond. Cleopatra, in turn, feared Antony's growing despair and instability. Their once shared vision had fractured. Octavian advanced steadily toward Egypt, encountering little resistance. Antony, desperate, tried to regroup, but the momentum was lost. Offers of peace were ignored. Octavian didn't want negotiation, he wanted total submission. He aimed to destroy not just a rival, but the myth of Antony and Cleopatra. As the final days approached, Antony's world unraveled. His authority collapsed. His purpose, once tied to love and empire, now seemed hollow. Cleopatra, ever the survivor, considered negotiations with Octavian, fearing for her children's future. The cracks in their unity grew. What had begun as passion and partnership was now eroded by fear, failure, and distrust. The betrayal was no longer from Rome, it was from within. Their love, once defiant, now staggered under the weight of lost battles and broken plans. As Octavian neared Alexandria, the end was no longer uncertain. It was inevitable. And the empire they dreamed of ruling together was already slipping into legend. With Octavian at the gates of Alexandria, Mark Antony stood at the edge of ruin. His forces had dwindled, loyalty eroded, and hope nearly gone. Messages were intercepted, allies had turned, and no reinforcements would come. The man who once commanded legions now wandered his palace halls, burdened by a love that had consumed his empire. Cleopatra retreated into her tomb-like chambers, guarded and sealed, preparing for the worst. Rumors spread that she had taken her own life to avoid capture. Antony, upon hearing this, was devastated. Believing the only thing he had left was gone, he made his final decision. He fell on his own sword, but the wound didn't kill him immediately. He was carried to Cleopatra, still alive, where he died in her arms, bleeding, broken, but still calling her his queen. For Cleopatra, grief had no time to settle. Octavian entered the city with full control. Her attempts to negotiate safety for her children were met with silence. Octavian had no intention of mercy. Cleopatra knew what awaited her: public humiliation in Rome, paraded as a defeated queen before her captor's triumph. She had seen it happen to others. She would not allow it to happen to her. She arranged her final affairs, ensured her treasures were hidden or destroyed, and met with her most loyal attendants. Then she ended her life, taking with her the final breath of Egypt's independence. The method remains debated: an asp bite, poison, or blade, but the result was certain. Cleopatra was dead, and with her, the last of the pharaohs. Octavian found her lifeless, too late to display her in chains. But her death sealed his victory. He annexed Egypt, declared it a Roman province, and took Cleopatra and Antony's surviving children to Rome. There, they were raised in a foreign land, their royal blood stripped of all power. Caesar Ion, Cleopatra's son with Julius Caesar, was executed, his existence too dangerous to Octavian's rule. The love story ended not in glory but in silence. Two rulers who had dared to believe they could defy the world paid with everything they had. Antony, once heir to Caesar's ambition, died a disgraced lover. Cleopatra, once the most powerful woman of the ancient world, chose death over subjugation. Together, they became legend. Their downfall wasn't sudden, it was slow, built on choices wrapped in emotion, pride, and desire. The betrayal wasn't just to Rome or their people, it was to themselves, for believing passion could bend an empire. And yet, their story endured, retold not just as failure, but as the tragic price of forbidden love. History wrote them as caution, but memory kept them as myth. Centuries later, their names still rise, whispered in halls of power and echoed in tales of doomed romance. Not for what they ruled, but for how they loved, fiercely, recklessly, and until the very end.